Well, Chuck, we're here. Times Square,
Yeah.
New York City, the Big Apple, bright lights, big city. How about that? We're here. It's UFC fight week, except, well, we can't have fights here in New York yet. We got to go across the river.
Yeah.
Newark, New Jersey, just as exciting. Do you feel it?
I feel it. We've got a chance to see Mark Ratner today, and he puts it at 50-50. So maybe by the end of the year, we'll be talking about doing it right here in New York City.
One of the weirdest things about this whole situation, you can have amateur MMA here in New York. You can hold press conferences, workouts, have stores devoted to the sport, but you still can't have pro MMA just yet. Hopefully that'll change sooner rather than later. For now, UFC on Fox 15 is this Saturday at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. This is the MMAfighting.com UFC on Fox 15 preview show. I'm Ariel Helwani alongside the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. We are in the heart of Times Square. This is very exciting. We have a great card, and it seems like these days the UFC likes to bring big cards to New Jersey just to tell New York this is what you could have. This is what you're missing. Let's talk about the main event first. Luke Rockhold, Lyoto Machida. These guys, they're not big trash talkers. They're not very flashy when it comes to the media. But, man, it's tough to beat this as far as free main events go. This is one of the most intriguing ones in a long time. Do you agree?
I totally agree. When this fight was made, it just had like that sort of curiosity attached to it. Lyoto Machida still has that sort of enigmatic fighting style, more counter-punch, more attack your aggression, the karate-based style. And Luke Rockhold just happens to be a guy who knows how to use space very well. And so you put those two guys together and you think, well, they both know how to operate in space. They're both very precise strikers. They're both very, if they connect with you hard, you're going to go down. To me, it's just one of those. It's one of those great fights that holds a lot of intrigue, and I never get any closer to figuring out who's going to win it. It's just one of those things you have to roll it out just to find out.
Why do you think Machida, other than the Weidman fight, which he lost, but it was a super close fight and a lot of fun as well, arguably the fight of the year. Why do you think he has looked so good and has become such a great finisher at 185?
Good question, man. I don't know. Maybe it could just be like rebirth at the weight class. Could be that he's just fighting the right guys. But ultimately, he has looked really, really good. That CB Dalloway thing was just that body kick was amazing. I thought he was coming on strong in the Weidman fight. Actually, if they play that fight again at some point down the future, you never know what's going to happen. I feel like it'd be a lot closer, just how he adapts and figures things out. But it's been a great move for him, and here he is. And I'm guessing now with the other middleweight fights sort of falling apart, that this is the fight. So here he is again. I guess Machida's just one of those guys, but this is going to be a tough one against Rockhold.
Do you feel like the winner of this fight should be the #1 contender?
I do, and particularly if it's Rockhold, because obviously Jacare would be in that mix, and maybe Yoel Romero, who's no longer on the card. But Jacare, I mean, you just have to go back to see their head-to-head. Even though it's in Strikeforce, I still would have to be like, well, he did beat him, and it was for a title. So I would still go with Jacare at this point, even though he had the Belfort loss. That's pretty much it. He's been spectacular the rest of the time. And Rockhold, if it's Rockhold and Weidman, to me, that's a really big fight.
Who do you favor? Every time I try to think about this fight and who I would pick, it feels like one minute I'm leaning towards Machida, the other minute I'm leaning towards Rockhold. The betting line's super close. Who do you favor?
Gosh, I'm in the same boat. I go back and forth. Ultimately, though, I just feel like Rockhold has just a little bit more in his arsenal to sort of operate. I think he'll disrupt the space a little bit, and he is a threat to take him down. He is a threat to shoot in and sort of change levels and do some stuff that maybe Lyoto won't try. So I guess I sort of lean that direction. I do feel like the one guy will go down. I feel like whoever wins this fight would be a TKO one way or another, but I'm leaning Rockhold.
You're leaning Rockhold via TKO. I'm not sure I heard that one just yet.
That's what I'm taking.
Wow.
Second round.
Second round TKO early. Wow. So you don't think Machida will have much for him?
3 minutes and 21 seconds. No.
You heard it here first. Could you imagine if you nail that? That'd be unbelievable. You'll go into the preview show Hall of Fame.
Well,
I'm so confident for Rockhold.
I wouldn't say I'm confident for Rockhold. I'm just tightening the bolts just to be specific. But I don't know, man. It's just the way he sort of uses. You ever see his fight slows down in front of him? I just feel like he's going against a guy who. He was a counter striker, but I think Rockhold is just so cerebral. He watched all those fights. I know he's saying he's watched the Hua series, those fights like 50 times. I think he's just one of those that really, really understands the movement, what's going to happen in the fight. He's a very precise striker. I just think at one point he's carrying a lot of power too. I just think at some point he catches him, and if Machida really tastes the full blunt of the blow, he's going to go down.
Let's talk about the quote-unquote co-main event. 6 days ago, our own Luke Thomas reported that Yoel Romero was out of the fight, torn meniscus. And then we were wondering, well, who's going to step up on a week's notice to fight Jacare? And then Saturday afternoon, during the card in Poland, they announced that Chris Camozzi, who lost to Jacare 2 years ago in a very short fight, also a short notice fight, Chris Camozzi, who's not currently in the UFC when this was announced, is back, and he's fighting him on a week's notice. What was your reaction when you found out that the replacement was going to be Chris Camozzi?
I was looking for typos. I was like, what? This can't be real. Honestly, I really thought that was not real at first. I sort of get it in one way, in a very small way, and it's a great opportunity for Chris Camozzi to be like, hey, I just won a couple fights on the local circuit after a 4-fight streak where I lost in the UFC, lost my job. I'll volunteer. It shows the power of volunteering in the UFC. Power of guys who just sort of like, hey, I'll fight anywhere, anytime. They really mean it. He's one of those guys. Yeah, that's really the thing. The first fight didn't really excite too many people, I don't think. Jacare sort of went right through him, so who knows. I will say this. Chris Camozzi, he's a good guy. You have to appreciate his willingness to do it. I think he probably at least feels he's better. He feels like he's seen what Jacare does a little bit. He hired Lester Bowling. And he's got his wrestling. I think he's integrating as we go, and he's getting some stuff together. Maybe I'm just fishing for silver linings, but from his perspective, I'm like, hey man, more power to you. It's just it's house money. It's a contract, so he's win or lose, he gets to stick around for a little bit. So
yeah, and he didn't really have to campaign much for it. All he did was write on the UG, and then Joe Silva sees it, says you want in. It's unbelievable.
Careers are born of desperation, man. Like and of necessity. When people go down, it's one of those things. What is going on over here? But
hello, ladies. Yes, have some new ladies here. If you'd like
some new ladies walking by.
Check it. Perhaps protesting the Chris Camozzi decision. Back to the fight, if we can. I thought his brother Brian Camozzi put it perfectly on Twitter. He said, the same people who are complaining about Chris, and by the way, I don't understand the people who are hating on Chris for stepping up. I mean, of course you're going to take the golden ticket. The same people who are complaining about Chris are the same people who'd be complaining if Jacare was pulled from the card. Complaining just to complain. It's a tough spot to be in. You could talk about Michael Bisping stepping up. He has a fight. You can't really do that to CB Dalloway. They didn't have much to work with here.
They really didn't, and I think that for the UFC's perspective, just being on a Fox card, they probably really wanted to keep as much intact as they could. Jacare still being Jacare. He's still a great showcase. They could look at it this way, like, well, let's just showcase his skills. It just helps boost his stock if he's in that title contention. To me, I'd rather see it. I'd rather see him fight somebody, even if it's a guy like Chris Camozzi, who's not really a pushover. I mean, he was riding a 4-fight winning streak before Jacare sort of put him on the spiral the other direction. So I'd rather see the fight than not see it. You'd rather see Jacare do his thing. He's a fun fighter to watch, regardless of who he's going against. So I'm happy they salvaged it.
If you're Jacare, though, are you hesitant? Because it's almost like if you don't beat this guy in 3 minutes, like last time, well, then it's not impressive. If you don't smoke, you know what I mean? It almost feels like, man, you really have to work against the clock here.
Yeah, this has crossed my mind. Actually, when you're talking about the equation of like trying to salvage a fight, it has to go two ways, right? I almost feel like more admiration for Jacare to take this fight, because what does he have to gain? He already beat this guy once. He could cede his spot where he's at and lose that footing. We've seen it before. It's these guys sometimes take these fights. I always think about the Rick Story, Charlie Brenneman one. Look how long it took Rick Story just to get back into where he was years later. So will it happen to Jacare? I don't know, but big kudos to him to actually accept the fight and say, like, yeah, you know what, I'm already doing everything. I'm already on my weight cut and everything else. I'm already in shape. Let's just keep the fight. It sounded like he was reluctant. He didn't really understand it, but he went with it. I think he's a true fighter in that sense.
He told me on Thursday that if he wins and Rockhold wins, he should get the title shot because, Rockhold has a loss in the UFC. But do you think a win over Camozzi is enough? I mean, he's here, he's ready to fight, but does he have to do a little more than that, regardless of what happens on Saturday?
That's sort of the bummer for him. See, when they had the whole middleweight medley going on, it was like sort of like, well, 4 guys are going to go in there, and the guy who looks the best, he gets the shot. But now, I agree. I think that Jacare now fighting Camozzi does not boost his stock. It doesn't even matter if he went in there and disintegrates him in 10 seconds. I just don't. I don't think it boosts his stock. Whereas Rockhold, he's fighting a guy like Machida, who gave Chris Weidman a pretty good fight. Machida being a former champion and everything. So if he wins emphatically, I think you got to go Rockhold. I still believe, too, I don't know if the UFC looks at this, but I don't know how much they might be a little reluctant to incorporate the Strikeforce back history, but the fact that they went head-to-head, it was a good fight, but the fact that they went head-to-head and Rockhold won it, I still give him the nod. Plus, his one loss in the UFC was Vitor Belfort in Brazil, when we already know all the asterisks that were climbing above that fight, so it's sort of, I sort of take that one a little more grain of salt as well.
Reebok's own Paige VanZant, 21 years old, in just her second UFC fight, will be competing on the main card against veteran Felice Herrig. Where do you stand on this one? Do you understand why they're here? They did 13 hours of New York media yesterday. Do you get the purpose of all of this, or do you feel like it's a bit too much too soon for Paige and maybe Felice as well?
I see it both ways. You know, I can see it from the UFC's perspective. I mean, you got these two pretty blonde women who can fight. They're going to be a great showcase on free TV. This is one of those things. If you're just flipping channels, you're going to stop and watch that thing. So to me, I could see the UFC's perspective. Now, if you're taking from a pure MMA perspective, you sort of think Paige VanZant, who she beat one woman in the UFC so far, and here she is, 21 years old in the Big Apple, and she's going to be on major TV. She seems to be handling it and everything like that, but I do feel like it's a little bit too much too soon. What I don't want, and that division, that strawweight division, is so wide open that it's sort of up for grabs. Whoever wins can make a claim like, hey, put me in the title. I hope if Paige VanZant does have a good fight in this one, if she gets by Felice Herrig, I hope she takes it a little slower, because I feel like she's a prime candidate to burn out quick and then sort of lose her bearings with her career. So we'll see what happens. So it feels like both. It's too much too soon, but it's also a fight you completely understand on national television.
Herrig was very confident about this fight when speaking at the media day. I mean, she really feels like Paige has nothing to offer, has no, is no threat at all to her. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you think it's going to be a closer fight?
I don't know. I think that I do favor Felice. I think she's just got more experience. She's probably got the edge in most areas, but I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park. Most of these fights aren't. Look at what just happened with Joanna Calderwood in Poland. It just, and then going back to the Dallas card with Carla Esparza. What is her name again?
Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
So I mean, you look at that fight.
She gets to know her name. She's the champion after all.
I was kidding, but that fight. You just never know. So Paige VanZant could go in there. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing if she went in there and beat Felice Herrig. So to me, it's pretty wide open. I just hope if she does do that, she doesn't start making claims for a title shot, because to me that would be too much too soon. Now, if Felice wins, I guess she might as well. But speaking of her, how crazy that she was about ready to call it quits not that long ago, right before going into the Tough House. It's just amazing in the fight game how many careers change so fast. Ronda Rousey sleeping in her car to this, blowing up and everything. It's amazing to see that in this sport. I feel like this sport is very unique for that thing alone.
Yeah, in a weird way, the UFC opportunity, the Ultimate Fighter opportunity in particular, saved her career, or at least prolonged it. It looked like she was really done after her last fight before the show, and she was in Invicta, and then it felt like the negativity was getting to her, and it was just bearing on her, and now here she is fighting on this massive stage. So your official pick is?
I'm going to go with Felice. Probably a decision. That's right.
By the way, I never asked your official pick Jacare fight. I don't know if that was maybe an oversight on my part. Are you going with the upset?
I think it's a given that Camozzi is going to shock the world. No, I'm going to go with Jacare. Hopefully it turns into actually a sort of competitive fight. I would say that's where you should set your expectation level on this one, but I'm going to go with Jacare.
Let's rifle through three more before they kick us out of here. Cub Swanson, Max Holloway. Who do you got?
That's a good fight. You know what I like about that fight is it's taking a guy who's sort of a perennial top 5, top 10 guy, and you always like those ones because there's a guy who's been sort of trying to break into that space, and he finally gets that big marker fight, a threshold fight. I feel like that's where Max Holloway is. So young, was he like 23 years old, but he's been amazing since that Conor McGregor loss. I'm sort of leaning towards Holloway. Wow. I'm not sure why. It's almost like more of a feeling of trajectories, you know what I mean? But I sort of lean towards Holloway. He looks very good. It's a great bit of matchmaking because you have it's an unusual one with Cub Swanson losing his last fight. And then with Max on this 5-fight winning streak. So, but before that, Cub had won a lot. To me, I like this sort of fight. But I'm gonna go with Max Holloway on this.
Jim Miller, Beneil Dariush.
Another toughie, man. Jim Miller, he's fighting in New Jersey, which is not a given. We've seen him lose, in New Jersey against Diaz and Pat Healy. There's been a couple of bad ones out here. I'm gonna think he's gonna perform like the old Jim Miller. I think he's gonna get it done, but that's going to be a tough fight. you know what's cool about this one is I feel like the matchup is equally compelling as when he was going to fight Paul Felder, because I was actually really into that fight when Jim Miller was going to be taking him on for the same reason we just talked about Holloway. You have a guy who's coming up versus a guy who's been there and he's been there. So it's sort of a similar vibe to that, but I'm going to go with Jim Miller.
And one more, Patrick Cummins versus Ovin St. Preux.
Your boy. I'm going to go with Patrick Cummins.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, it's a really intriguing fight on a lot of levels. A couple of, with the wrestling and everything that goes, two pretty immovable objects. But I'm gonna go with Patrick Cummins in this one, a decision.
Start spreading the news. It's fight night on Saturday. I want to be a brand new part of it. Newark. UFC Fight Night, Newark, New Jersey, my friends. We just talked about 6 fights. I got to tell you, the top 8 are fantastic. Yeah. We didn't talk about Corey Anderson versus John Vellante. Corey Anderson, TUF 19 winner. And then how about this one, kicking it all off on Fox, Aljamain Sterling against Takeya Mizugaki. And by the way, the top 8 fights are on Fox. No FS1 prelims this time. There are also 3 Fight Pass fights as well. So it's a great night of fights on Saturday. Here in the tri-state area, we're not quite in the Big Apple just yet. We're just across the river in Newark, New Jersey. And by the way, New Jersey deserves it. They've been supporting MMA since pretty much longer than anyone at this point, so they deserve it. And one hopes, as much as we're sort of biased towards New York, one hopes that UFC doesn't turn their back on New Jersey if and when New York finally legalizes MMA. That does it for us from here in Times Square. For Chuck, I'm Ariel. Thank you so much for watching, and check out all our Fight Night coverage Saturday night from New Jersey. We'll see you then.